Hi everyone! So nice to have you with us for another edition of Find Your Fairy Tale. Tonight's guest is author Helene Dunbar, and what's interesting is I met her when she was an author. But had I met her maybe in another chapter in her life, I might have met a marketing manager or a theater critic, or I might have met a fellow journalist. My point is that Helene has had a lot of different adventures in her career, and I want to talk about what to do as you sort of migrate from interest to interest and opportunity to opportunity, because a fairy tale isn't constant and a fairy tale can change, and a fairy tale is an organic thing that we can grow with and grow into. And I think she's an awesome person to weigh in on how you achieve that. Hi, friend.
Hi, it's
Oh,
been a while.
it has been a little more than a year since I saw that awesome smile. How are you?
I
Oh, are you freezing? Are you there? There you
school
go.
decided to call.
That's, yes. If somebody calls you or texts you and see, oops, and now I'm falling off my tripod like an earthquake. So, I think we have established the connection. First of all, how are you doing in these weird times?
You know, as an introvert, I'm probably doing better than most people I know. I
Yeah.
have the ability to work from home. My daughter's doing great at virtual learning. I don't have to drive an hour each way to the office. It's
Yeah.
actually, I'm doing a lot of jigsaw puzzles. It's not bad. I
It's
mean, aside
interesting.
from the reason for it all.
Right, right. When you
Yeah.
take away the overarching severity and
Yeah.
seriousness of it, I feel like we've gained time within our days, but
Yes.
obviously it is stealing time from our life plans.
Yeah.
But what is the life plan anyway? We're just going to crumple that up and throw it out the window.
And why have a plan? It never goes according to plan. So
Well, I have to just tell everybody, I'm a little bit ruined today, thanks to Helene and her book, in a good
oh,
way, in a good way. It's been a long time since a book really grabbed me like yours did. And it isn't your most recent book to come out, but it was one that when I met you a year ago, you were talking about. So that was the one that I wanted to dive into just because I felt like that was how I met you, and some exciting stuff was going on about it being optioned for film at the
mhm.
time. So We're Lost and Found, interestingly, is a historical fiction.
Yes.
And I remember
Set in the
laughing with
80s.
you. Yeah, I remember laughing with you because that historical fiction is stuff that happened in my lifetime and certainly many people's lifetime.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it's about the AIDS crisis. It's about teenagers trying to grapple with that. And I think it struck me right now because there was so much fear of the unknown in a different way, but it had some veins of what's going on right now. How do we get it?
Yeah.
What can hurt us? What do we know? What don't we know? But you
Why
wrote
isn't the government doing more about it?
right, right. Do people not care about certain groups
Yeah.
of people?
Hmm.
So I found it really compelling. But you stumbled into, was that your first novel that you published or no?
Now it was my fourth.
Your fourth, okay.
Yeah. And so, but probably the sixth that we sold, because I have
Yeah.
a history of publishing out of order, which is not something I would recommend anybody ever do.
Someone who's
Um,
not familiar with the publishing industry, what do you mean publishing out of order?
so I'll tell you a really brief story about my first two books.
Yeah.
So I got an agent on my third manuscript, which is a whole other story. And my agent sent it out to editors, and we got the usual rejections, or wow, we loved it but we don't know what to do with it, all the things you typically hear from editors. And then we didn't really hear much more, but I had this other book ready to go. So we sent that out, and the editor who ended up buying it, which was Brian Ferry from Flux, he still had my first manuscript on his desk unread after a year,
Wow,
which
okay.
is publishing. So, we said, hey, want to read that? And he's like, give me the weekend. And he read it and he bought both of them.
Wow.
But so the second book published before the first book published.
That's
And then
interesting, but you had options. You just kept writing, so you were ready to go.
I
What
was
made you
ready to
start
go.
writing novels when you did compared to what you started out doing?
Um, when I was a kid, I used to love the idea, like, I'm going to write books because I was one of
Me
those
too.
kids who lived in the library and it was my safe
Me too.
place. Yeah. So you always think, like, ooh, how do I get my name on those shelves? And it seems like nothing a real person could ever do. Um, and I won like a writing contest in ninth grade and a novel I wrote on an old typewriter that my dad had been given in 1952.
Love it.
So it was literally, there are so many misspellings in this thing, but I won something from the Detroit paper. And then I took a creative writing class in college and did really poorly on it. And I said, yeah, it's not for me. I always kind of wanted to veer towards journalism. And by that point, I had decided that really what I loved more than anything was theater. I hated being on stage, but I loved the idea that I could write about it. Like it seemed the perfect mix of everything I cared about. And so I pursued drama criticism, and I was a drama critic in college, or right after college in Chicago. And it was many years later that I had a couple of college friends basically badger me into trying fiction again. And I was writing for a music magazine in Ireland. And I was meeting all these amazing characters on the Irish music scene in New York. And one of my friends was like, you've got to write about this. And I'm like, I can't write fiction, which I had been saying for, decades, really. And she was like, literally, they just didn't let up. So one night where I unexpectedly had nothing to do, I sat down at the typewriter.
Yeah.
Or computer, actually. By then it was actually a real computer. And I wrote, not in one sitting, but I wrote an urban fairy novel about Irish music playing elemental fairies. It was 104,000 words. And I finished it. And I was like, maybe I can do this.
And you just churned that out.
Well, I wouldn't say I just turned it. It took me, I don't know, that first book probably only took me a year. No one will ever see it. But
No,
but
you
I
know what?
finished
Maybe
it.
maybe it's frolicking somewhere in the lost place where my time traveling lifeguard novel lives.
I don't know. I kind of want to read that.
I kind of want to read about the Irish music fairy elemental fairies.
It was the most emo thing you will ever read.
No,
All
I
of
was.
my characters were just amped up to 11 all the time. And,
Yeah, I think 11 would have been sedated for my characters. So I hear you. It's interesting though, actually, from an art perspective. I think sometimes you have to take it to that level to just explore that new side of yourself. And things are going to be a little over the top because bleh, it's the first time it ever came out that way. It's like all of the emotion,
I
all
mean,
of the feels.
all of it was also down to what I was reading, because I was an English theater major in college, which
Yeah.
means I had no time to read anything for fun. So many years later, I moved to England and I got married, and I started reading. I don't even know why I started reading it. It was like the rarest. I was desperate. I had nothing to read.
Yeah.
And I got Melissa Marr's Ink Exchange, and it was the edgiest, darkest thing I had read, and it was young adult.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't have young adult when I was a young adult. You basically went from middle grade chapter books to adult stuff, and there was nothing in the middle. I would have done so much to have books like that.
I'm trying to think. I did have young adult, but a lot of it was contemporary at the
Mm-hmm.
time. I think that's probably why when even as recently as Twilight came out, people were it turned so many heads. It was like, wow, we can have this sort of, juicy, amped up emo at 11 story that sucks all the 32-year-olds going on 16 right
Yeah.
back into that world.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I remember reading Twilight and absolutely devouring it for that reason, because we didn't have that. So it hit a part of me that had been kind of, not recognized before, I guess. And yeah, I think both Twilight and Ink Exchange, there's a similarity in that they're both set in the real world.
Mhm.
They've got fantastical elements,
Right.
but you felt like you could be friends with these people.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And that, I mean, I like to write in the YA space because it is such a raw and formative time. So
Hmm.
I think that that's what draws me to it. Did you ever see yourself writing in this world, in this space? Was that your fairy tale, your happily ever after, or did you stumble into it?
No, I mean, I really stumbled into it. Like my fairy tale was I was going to be Frank Rich of the New York Times back when he was doing
Yeah.
theater criticism, or I was going to be a baseball reporter, or I was going to be, Bob Woodward. I wanted to do politics, baseball, or theater. That was it. And fiction never, I knew I could create a character, but I always struggled with plot. Some would say
Hmm.
I still do. And character is still my strength, so I didn't know how to get my characters to do anything. And it just didn't seem worth the struggle,
Yeah.
given that there were other things I loved, that when you're 20, you think anything's possible. So, like I thought maybe I will be Frank Rich, maybe I will be Bob Woodward. Who knows, so.
What do you make of that for the trajectory of dreaming big and falling on the rung of the ladder you fall? Because I always used to say, hey, as long as you're climbing the right ladder, it doesn't matter what rung. This was like my 20-year-old philosophy.
Right.
I was like, it doesn't matter what rung you get to, you're on the right ladder. At least you're on the right ladder. And then I realized that there are a lot of ladders that I wouldn't mind being on. And I started stepping from one ladder to the other. And then it starts getting tippy. And then you start looking and being like, should I be climbing that one? Did you ever worry that you were starting your author career late and you were behind? Did that ever occur to you? But 4 or 5, 6 books later, obviously no. But did you have those dragons to slay?
Um, no. When I started writing fiction, I was doing it for fun. And I
Yeah,
was doing it, that there's an adage, write the book you want to see on the shelf that you can't find. And
yeah,
that has always driven me. So I don't know. I remember actually somebody who's a very successful author now. We had talked about becoming critique partners, and we were gonna, bounce stuff off of each other. And she was like, "Yeah, but to get published, you have to do A, B, and C." And I'm like, "I'm not like I'm working on my first manuscript. I'm not worried about being published."
mhm,
We were in different headspaces, so we ended up not pursuing that relationship because I just wanted to learn the craft. For me, it was just like a big, playground
yeah,
because I hadn't done anything wrong yet. And and it was all like open to me. And it was so much fun, and I'm not saying it's not anymore, but it was so, I didn't know any of the rules. So I
yeah.
didn't ever feel like I was breaking any of them.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, people will be like, "Oh, but how do you find time to write? When do you write?" And I'm like, "When do you watch TV?
Yeah.
When do you watch a movie? When do you have a cup of tea or a glass of wine?"
Hmm.
It's my downtime, but
Right.
it's also a huge passion. So that's why it's so important to me to be picking people's brains who have all of these different loves that they've pursued in their professional lives to try to find what it is that lets you get on that right ladder to
Hmm.
go back to my 22-year-old analogy.
Well,
But
no, I think that latter thing is fascinating because I mean, I still professionally am not sure I'm on the correct ladder.
maybe there
Um,
is no correct ladder.
Maybe there
Maybe
is
the
no correct
ladder is the
ladder.
wrong metaphor and it's like a spiral staircase and slides. It's a playground.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a playground.
But I think I shared, when I was that age, I definitely shared that, like, you start at this level and you get
Hmm.
promoted and you do better and you win awards and and that is so not what has happened to me, that I really, looking back, have to, say it's not really about ladders, it's about being open to opportunities.
Yeah, and we were chatting, guys. If you're watching, we were chatting one night on direct message on Instagram when I was talking about this whole idea, and Helene said something that struck me, and that's what I had posted today, which was she was just writing in passing to me, and what do? I steal it, I quote it, and I publicize it everywhere because yeah, it was that good. But what she said was, I think there's something to be said for not assuming that what you're doing now is what you'll ever do. You just have to stay open to inspiration and give yourself the room to try things on. And I
Mm-hmm.
loved that because that is what this is all about. Oh, okay, ready? So Dom, my
Yeah.
co-author, Dom, she just chimed in and said lattice. Maybe it's a lattice, not a ladder.
Yeah.
So it's just like one big interconnected thing and we can
Yeah.
climb it like monkey bars.
And I think, that's the best thing, because if you can find something that takes you this next step up, but that brings your other loves into it, like
Yes.
what a gift.
Yeah, when you can combine the things that you
Yeah.
love. And in many ways, writing YA sort of did that for you because young
Mm-hmm.
adult is dramatic, more so
It is.
than the literary fiction of grown adults, perhaps. But I
Yeah.
found your writing to be quite grown up, especially, I mean, the topic again about the AIDS crisis and teenagers dealing with it. I was thinking, if you had made your character an adult looking back, it absolutely could have lived on an adult fiction shelf. So, what made
Mm-hmm.
you decide to go the young adult way with it?
Um, I made it young adult because that's what I've always written.
Yeah.
To me, a lot of adult writing is, descriptions about the wallpaper and the chair. And it's so dense. And the reason I love YA is for the immediacy and the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, it's funny, my agent and I actually kicked around the idea of, do we do this as a young adult? Do we do it as an adult, as an adult book? But because I was the same age in the same year as my characters, to
Yeah.
me, it felt so immediate. And it was so much my reliving that story, or most of the story, that you know, I think had it not sold, had it not caught, we would have looked at possibly going out with it adult. But I think I would have had to put a different kind of rose-colored spin on it, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to do that.
Know that, like, looking back, now I know
Mm-hmm.
what I know. And yeah, I've said before that I like writing young adult because they don't know anything yet. You
Right.
think you think you know everything. You're learning it, you're feeling it all for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what pushed the book forward to me, was just these kids. They were so hopeful and they wanted love and they wanted to be independent, but there was this looming fear that I was relatively young, in the 80s when
Mm-hmm.
I did the just say no, the drug walks, the
Right.
the raise
The
awareness
red
meetings. I
ribbon.
did all that, but I didn't have people in my life who I lost. And you said that this book was inspired by a lot of personal experience, things that you saw.
Well, it was inspired by a couple of things. One was, like I said, I was a year older than my characters. So I graduated high school in 1983, which is the year the book is set. And for me, it's funny, and it ties into why I set it in 83 instead of 85. Because 85, so much was known about the AIDS
Mm-hmm.
crisis, so much more, anyhow. I wanted to capture that, being 17, 18 is this time your whole life is being upended and changed, and what am I going to do with it? And people are pressuring you and they want to know. And so add on top of that a pandemic that's, linked to having sex,
Right.
which maybe you haven't had yet, and maybe you want to have, or maybe you're coming out, and that's, an issue. And it just amps that up so high. And that's what my friends and I were going through, because in that, in the 9 months that this book is set, nobody knew how you could get AIDS. Nobody knew that it was a virus.
And I think a lot of people even forget that was,
Mm-hmm.
in our teenagers now, it's such a known thing that you
Right.
forget that there was this chapter. Yeah, there was a chapter where a little bit was known, but there was also that piece of time where nothing was
Right.
known. Yeah.
Well, and it was also, I had read a number of studies of particularly high school students in the UK,
Hmm.
and they were surveyed about AIDS and, how you can catch it. And something like 76% of high school seniors in Scotland thought you could get it from a toilet seat,
Yeah.
you
I
know?
remember filling out little quizzes in
Hmm.
school that said, true or false, and learning that that was
Right.
false. But clearly we had to learn it was false because somewhere somebody thought it had been true.
Right, right. I
Yeah.
mean, and that was certainly thrown around. Or maybe gay men have a certain gene that AIDS can connect with. I mean, when I was in high school, that was a possibility. They didn't know that that wasn't true.
Right.
So it was kind of an amalgamation of that. I worked for the AIDS Activities Office of a state government in the very early 90s, and worked on outreach to marginalized communities. And a lot of the people I met there, really shaped in the back of my mind, that their story needed to be told, that this needed to be addressed. And I think the older I got, the more people seem to forget about it.
Hmm.
Prep is like the greatest thing in the world. But if you start thinking like I can do whatever I want because I can just pop a pill, then you're playing Russian roulette, and I didn't see anything in the YA space that really addressed how did it feel being 16, 17, 18 at that time when you weren't worried about, an uncle who was sick or a father who was sick, but you were worried about yourself.
Right, right. And you were young and it was so very deadly. A question for you, I listened to it because I'm always running around. And so the book was read by a male narrator.
Town
And your
Picasso.
character is
Hmm.
a young gay teenager, a boy.
Yep.
And I never once doubted your voice. But I wonder if anybody ever did give you a hard time because you're writing from something that you had personal experience seeing, but not living.
Um, okay, so let me break that question into two. When the deal came out, yeah, there was a lot of pushback. I think people were very worried that this was going to be tragedy porn. Um, And the people who were thinking that were not people who had been adolescents or adults in 1983, because
Hmm.
had they been, they would know that in 1983, the people getting sick weren't 17-year-old boys. They were men in their 30s and 40s for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I'm sure maybe there was, a handful, but that wasn't the demographic. Um, and this wasn't a book about death. It's a book about learning to love and learning to risk, what's worth taking the risk to live, and how do you want to live and who do you want to be through that life. So, I always knew that this was the story. It was in the back of my head for years. I just had to find a way to tell it. And the reaction I've gotten from men in their 50s who were the age of my characters has been almost unanimously phenomenal. Um, I had the amazing honor of doing an event in New York with Ron Goldberg, who wrote one of the afterwords to this book. And he was the chant queen for ACT UP New York at the time in the 80s and 90s. And the room was filled with basically men who had volunteered for ACT UP in the 80s. Tom Picasso, who was my narrator, was also there. Jeremiah Johnson, who had the other co-authored the other afterword in this book, was there. The support I got from that community was absolutely, I can't even put it into words. It was like the best night of my life.
So you
And
knew, you felt probably, you lived and watched a chapter of history, and as somebody documenting that, you got vindicated completely. Like they said, you got it right.
oh yeah, well, I mean, not only that, but it was like, thank you for telling the story for
Yeah.
the people who aren't here to do it. And the thing is, I am not male, and although 98% of my main characters are, but there is, I would say 90% of this book is from my life. I was in New York in the 80s. There are things from letters from friends and diaries I kept and notes and, research I went and did and went, oh yeah, that reminds me of walking by that store. And so the details that make this book feel real, for the
Are
most
yours.
part, are from my life.
And I think too, though, feelings and the raw emotion, what it feels like to fall in love, what it feels like to wonder if this person is right or wrong for you, is keeping secrets from you. Are you
Mm-hmm.
going to embarrass your family? Are your parents going to support you? Those are questions that go beyond, um, gender or
Mm-hmm.
sexuality or age for that matter, even. Those are still questions that people can ask themselves today.
Right.
So I bring this up because I think it's so important to get back to the root of what fiction intends to do, and to find those universal human traits regardless of the the physical makeup of your character.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean,
But
really, this is a book about fear as much as it is about anything else.
mhm,
Fear of the unknown. And what is adolescence about, if not fear of the unknown?
right, right, completely. Are your other books as raw?
um,
Can I read them, or will I
yeah,
be equally demolished emotionally?
yeah, probably. They don't, I didn't set out to do that. Let's say that. Um, Part of what makes We Are Lost and Found so raw is not only the subject matter, but the style it's told in. I think the vignettes, you know, I got to play to my strengths. And you and I had talked about theater a little bit.
Yeah.
I think being a drama critic for many years taught me a lot about dialogue. And I much rather write dialogue than straight prose. And this book, I got to cut out all of the weeds. And it's literally, everything is to the heart of what those two sentences need to talk about. And I didn't have to pad them. My other books are all straight prose. So it's a different, my first book that came out, These Gentle Wounds, is about childhood PTSD, because I really wanted to focus on, the trauma that childhood abuse causes. My second book's about What Remains is about organ transplants and the possibility of cellular memory. Like, if you get somebody's kidney, do you start
Remember.
feeling what they felt?
Mhm.
Um, Boomerang is a book about a runaway who was assumed to have been kidnapped, but he actually ran away and found a life he much preferred, and then had to come back for a whole slew of reasons and make his peace with his past.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
and then Prelude is a paranormal. It's a contemporary paranormal, but again, it's a book about people who live in a town where everybody speaks to the dead. So it's about loss, different types of loss and grieving and learning how to move on and what that looks like. So I think there are
So
definitely
I'll just light,
threads.
fluffy, easy reads. Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Prelude was supposed to be my fluffy book, and it did not end there.
Well, yeah, paranormal. I mean, it adds a little like fun in that sense because you're dabbling in fantasy. But yeah, today I finished your book today in the morning, and then I worked on my latest book, and I had to kill someone in my book that I love very much. And so by the end of the day, I was like, I don't even know. I can't even function anymore. I'm not even in this
I'm
reality.
sorry.
It's so interesting how writing and creating art can pull you into such a crazy mood and such a crazy place, isn't it? You go somewhere.
Well, also to do it well, you have to become that character.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
So I died today? No.
no.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Oh no, it's so interesting how deep you have to go to make that. And I really couldn't get out of the funk today. But um, when you saw the trajectory of where you were going, once you started selling books, one, two, four, out of order,
Right.
and then you got option for film for We're Lost and Found. That I think happened at the conference where I met you. I heard like a little buzz and everyone was like, that author over there just got her
Oh my
book
God.
optioned. And I was
I
like,
didn't know.
oh yeah. I was like, I met that author at breakfast. She's really nice. I'm excited for her. So that was before I really had a chance to get to know you and talk to you.
Right.
But um, what did that feel like? And take us through that process a little bit.
I mean, honestly, I would, without a doubt, get rid of all of my other books and just like what We Are Lost and Found really feels like what I started writing fiction to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
So for any book to be noticed, I'm glad, that's the
That's the
most
one.
heartwarming thing because the letters I've gotten letters from teens that are like, I read it with my dad and I didn't know that he had friends who had passed away from AIDS. But it
Yeah.
opened this dialogue with my parents.
Conversation. Mm-hmm.
Or, my friend was just diagnosed and I don't know what's going to happen. Like it's been amazing. And the producers who optioned this, it's Il Kippers, which is Nikolai Coster-Waldau from Game of Thrones. It's his new production company. Along with Julian Morris from Pretty Little Liars.
Yeah.
Like they get this book and we have very similar views about why it would be important for people to read, to see, to live in, to remember.
Yeah.
And that's really more than anything else. That's all I want. It's not about lists, although I'm incredibly grateful, for the times it's been recognized, and it's not about anything else. It's just I want people to read this book because I want them to know what it was like.
Yeah. And to leave that lasting dialogue prompter,
Yeah.
that conversation starter, that sort of introspection. Have you gotten any pushback on it at all?
Since it came out, not much. I mean, there's always like the 5-star review that's like, this is an amazing book. However, I was so surprised to find out it was written by a woman. It's just like, sorry, dude.
What's your advice to somebody on that note who is scared to write a story out of their own experience? Because for a very long time, that's all that fiction was. It was do it right, research it well, know your topic. And, the old adage, write what you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a fear of stepping on an experience that you don't have the right to participate in.
Right.
So what is your advice to somebody who's feeling a story that maybe is outside of their technical realm, but
I
that's the
think
story they want to tell?
right. The question to me, or that I would ask, is why do you want to tell this? Do you want to tell this because you read a magazine article and you thought it was interesting, or somebody wrote a blog post? In that case, I would say no. I was willing. I knew because I had lived so much of this story. Again, this is not a story of people getting sick and dying. It's, a story of fear of the unknown. And I went through what my characters went through at that time. And I felt completely justified in telling that story. And what I would do is I would call Ron and I would be hyperventilating and I'd be like, I got this, and he'd be like, you should have seen what we went through in the 80s, like Act Up got so much shit. And I was like, what the heck am I worried about people on Twitter for? Like the people who are really on the front lines, who are really fighting the fight, got far worse than I'm going to get, and it's fine.
So if it's a story that's true to your heart, true to your experience, you're compelled to write it. Don't necessarily second guess it. Just do it right. Do it sincerely. Yeah. Do it with heart.
Yeah, I would say if it's something, again, there were a couple of really early comments about, had the main character in We Are Lost and Found been a girl, it would have been a different type of fear. I had a different type of fear from my, gay male friends at the time. And in retrospect, people would have read that differently.
Right.
Because the mortality rates are so skewed. I mean, women got AIDS. There was actually a very young Twitter person who, when the deal came out and there was a brouhaha, was like, women don't get AIDS. And I literally wanted to tweet the picture of Act Up, all of the women in Act Up with signs saying, we don't get AIDS, we just die from it. Because that, they had to educate people too that, yes, women get AIDS, and I wasn't going to wade into that at the time, but, I basically, I have an amazing agent who is very, very politically savvy and aware. And she and, the people I know from ACT UP and whatnot, all said, this is important. And I said, you know what? If they say it's important, this is where my heart is, I need to do this.
So and just be bold and tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it for what it's worth. It rang so emotionally strong for me. It was really amazing. You have Fangirl for life now. Now I have to download all the rest of the books and listen to them. This is my new discovery is audiobooks and listening to them in busy life. It makes running errands and folding laundry and driving places so much more amazing. The voice just comes on and I'm like, oh yeah, this.
It's funny. So when I met Tom Picasso, who did We Are Lost and Found, and I adore him. He's like a great person and a phenomenal narrator. But I told him point blank, I said, it was fascinating to listen to because you read this differently than I would have. And so it was really interesting to hear it in somebody else's voice through their eyes. The narrators of Prelude, I think, made it a better book. They are absolutely they took what I have in my head and just went off a ledge with it. And it is fantastic. So definitely.
It's tough giving up ownership of that, but then it's really fun when you realize it's art meets art. It's their interpretation,
right.
Meeting your intention, and it sort of is its own different piece of work in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I forget sometimes, even though I would say I'm in a constant state of revision because my writing process is massively chaotic, but I probably read each of my books, 400 or 500 times.
Yeah.
I know writers who are literally like, I read my book 4 times. I draft it, I reread it, and it's like, yeah, I'm definitely in the hundreds. But I forget stuff, it takes a while for the book to
land in it. No, I always have to rewind and kind of read a couple chapters at least before to write the next one, or start from the beginning just to remind myself that I wrote good stuff at the beginning. And be like, okay, what's my character thinking?
Right.
So, yeah, for somebody who wants to get started, you said you did it for fun, and your friends made you. So you had the right group around you. They were like, you have to. So my takeaway from that is, you have to surround yourself with a community that sees your talent, maybe even beyond yourself. But I mean, we have the friends that we do. So if no one's hollering at you to go do it, what do you have to listen to in yourself to chase that passion and maybe that unrealized dream?
I mean, I think the number one thing that made it easiest for me at the beginning wasn't the people around me. It's that I really was just doing it for fun. So there wasn't a pressure like this has to get published. And publishing is far more complicated now than it was in 2010, you know, when I started. But, you know, I eventually did find a writing community. You find people online, you know, most of my writing partners are online or at events or, you know, however you tend to meet up with people. And, you know, you exchange chapters and maybe you hit it off. I've been very fortunate to have some amazing critique partners, most of whom have moved on to other things, which is super sad. And I just kind of had to write a book on my own with, you know, and I used beta readers. So I've got writing friends who like read it and critiqued it after the fact, but they weren't necessarily people I could text in the middle of the night and say, hey, what if character A, you know, rode an elephant into the, you know, whatever, the, you know, and for them to say, go back to bed, that's a horrible idea. You know, if you can get one of those people that you can text in the middle of the night who know your characters as well as you do, they are a gift and you should do whatever you can to keep them. But, you know, a lot of it has to be kind of self-driven. And like I said, I think because I was doing it for fun, I didn't put that pressure on myself. It's different now. You know, now it's like, what if I spend 3 years writing a book and it, you know, nobody buys it? You know,
I think that's a fear that I've seen a lot of the people who are tuning in and watching. They'll ask in different ways, different times. You know, they're scared to make the time and the commitment, the investment into something that they might fail. And the takeaway has been, well, there's no such thing as failing. It just means try harder or do this. But I think I love what you're saying, where there's no fear of failure if you're just doing it for fun. And so if you start something on the side, you know, and see if it has wings, see if it has that ability to take you into a new chapter, but maybe don't rely on it too soon.
Right. And I think, you know, I also tried to keep learning. And I'm not a craft person. I'm not a read the craft books. I don't outline. Like outlining to me is like from the devil. I can't do it. I tried to outline a book once that's still an idea I love. It was a 70s historical. And it killed it for me because I knew what happened. And there was no like,
thank you. That's what I said. Why do I want to write a book where I know everything that happens? That's so boring.
Well, I couldn't do it. It's not even that I didn't want to. It's like I knew points A, H, and Z, and I couldn't connect them because in this outline they were already kind of mushed together and there was nothing else. So,
do you see this when Dominique is writing here? You and Sorboni were made for each other. And guys who are watching, like, this is my co-author of my latest project. Yeah. So she is the person that I call in the middle of the night and say, you know, should they run away on the elephant? No, that's terrible. I need to go back to sleep. But yeah, the outlines, the outlines. I'm like, why are you putting me in outline jail?
Well, I'm going to guess from her comments that she is an outliner. My number one the best writing partner I've ever had. And I've only lost her because she's doing like a ton of like pseudonymal, she's publishing under a couple pseudonyms. She's doing a lot of self-publishing.
Pseudonymal, I like that.
She's become definitely not a word.
Pseudonymous.
Yeah, something like that. But she is literally the most structured writer I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
And somehow the two of us worked together. Like she could write action and I would write, you know, I was forever notating, but what does this character feel? You know, find that you've got them in this sword fight where every step is choreographed. I can't do that. You know, with mine, it would be like, he takes out a knife and then it, you know, whatever. But it's like 2 steps and she would write 7 chapters. And I was always reminding her, like, where's the emotion in this? Because if you can't connect, even in a sword fight, you're not going to feel the loss. So, you know, balance is like super important. So for writers just starting out, the number one piece of advice I always give is don't follow anybody else's rules. Don't let somebody tell you you can't outline. Don't let somebody tell you you have to outline. Don't let somebody tell you you have to write every day. I don't write every day. Sometimes when I have time to write, I have no ideas. And sometimes when I have a million ideas, I'm in the line at the grocery store making notes on my phone. You know, I mean, I've got a kid I'm virtual schooling and a day job. And, you know, the time is literally, you know, when I'm at a stoplight and I'm like, oh no, I need to get these keywords down before the light turns green. You know, it takes me 3 years to write a book for a reason. I'm not joking. It really does.
We write in the stolen time, and I think a lot of the fairy tales are created and spun in the stolen time for so many of us. I think that there are so many obligations, you know, the stuff that real life is made of, that the passion projects become the luxury that you do when you can.
Right. But like you said earlier too, it's, you know, life is filled with choices. So I can work on my book or I can go watch this movie. I can work on my book or I can go join a knitting group. I can work on my book or I can, you know, exercise. That's my excuse for not exercising. You know, but
it's true though.
You know,
it's so hard to be able to do both. I mean, if you stay up until midnight writing, are you going to get up at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning and go for that run? No. But it was a good chapter.
I have no idea how you do it, but
Listen, I'm your next novel. I'm set in the real world, but I'm actually a vampire. I don't sleep.
Oh.
You know what? I ebb and flow and crash and burn. I'm very productive, and then all of a sudden I'm exhausted. And then I kind of scale back, and then I go full throttle again. I don't know how to not do everything at once until I literally cannot. And then I stop, and I call it canceling my life. I cancel my life. I say, you know, that wedding 2 years from now that I'm not even invited to yet, I don't even know those people, I'm not going. And by the next day I've slept and I'm okay again.
Right. I'm the opposite. I sleep, you know, all the time like a cat. I sleep like 12 hours on the weekends, and
that's a beautiful thing.
I have no choice. I'm a sleep hog. And but you know, I've also written, you know, 5,000 words at a board meeting, and you know, I'm not a night writer. I'm not a day writer. I'm like literally when it hits me and I can't stop myself from writing, that's when I'm writing. You know, and because I write out of order and I give myself permission to just, okay, here's an example. Prelude. I had an idea of what Prelude was going to be about because it's based on a real place. It's based on a town in upstate New York of spiritualists where, you know, it's a gated community. They let people in the summer for $15, and you go in and you meet with a town resident and you talk to your dead relatives. And I thought, what an amazing place for a YA. And I was going to base this story on the story of the Fox sisters, who are these sisters in the 1800s, were a big, like, were they really mediums? Were they making it up? They kept going back and forth on the stories. There were a lot of like deathbed confession type things. I thought, oh, this is going to be great. It wasn't working. And all of a sudden, one of my main characters, said, like as I was typing, stream of consciousness said something about his imaginary childhood friend returning. And I was like, what? That friend became the literally the core of this book.
Isn't that interesting? And that it just, I say that happens to me too. The characters tell me, you know, they write the book. I'm just here to make it sound pretty. They tell me what to do, and then I just make their story sound pretty.
I had a problem because the love interest in Boomerang, his name was Trip. And it unfortunately was around the time of the election, and that's the name of Sarah Palin's son. And I was like, no, I'm not naming him Trip. But like it came to me in a dream. Like, and I was like, no, his name is Trip. And I'm like, I don't want his name to be Trip, but his name was Trip, and I was stuck with it.
Listen, you had it first, okay? You had it first. Don't let politics steal your characters. No. Politics and creative writing, the two shall not meet and intertwine and tangle.
I want to live your life then, if that's
My life is like this.
yeah.
No, I think the big takeaway that I want for people who watch this is just that if you follow what you love to do, and just put it out there with every good intention, it seems like the book that you love the most was received, in a way that matters the most. So you put that sincere effort out there, and there was no ulterior motive in a sense.
Right.
And look at how successful it is.
Yeah, I mean, and again, how do you rate success? I've never made a New York Times bestseller list. Publishing is really, really vicious, as you know, because there's always another level above you. It doesn't literally matter how high up in publishing you are. There's always a group of people that you think you're a better writer than, who have been more successful, and that never stops. And, if you're a person who can tune that out and just say, did I write a book I'm proud of?
Mm-hmm.
Is this a book that people are connecting to? Is this a book that, is telling a story that I wanted to tell? You kind of got to refocus all the time on that, and there are tiny successes. There's walking into a bookstore and going up to the bookseller and saying, hey, you have my book on your shelf. Can I sign them?
Mm-hmm.
For the girl inside of me who lived in bookstores, that was my, haven. Really, is there anything better? Is there anything better than bringing my 80-year-old dad to a bookstore and watching him watch me do that? No.
Right. Yeah. For me, my moment was the library, not the bookstore, because I never bought books. So when I saw my book with the plastic cover on it and the little number stuck to the side, I was like, oh, I exist. I'm going to be read. This is amazing. I'm going to live forever.
Yeah. And my second book, actually, I did my book release at the library in my childhood town. And
that's so fun.
I had friends from kindergarten show up, and it was amazing.
Yeah. I think that's a really good reminder, though, to not compare yourself and look at where you're standing in relation to some version of success that you think you're reaching for, and just do it for the joy of it, and do it for the small moments of pride that you have for the accomplishment.
Look, that's hard, and I'm not going to say that I do that. Okay, so I was a drama critic for many years. I know how subjective reviews are. I'm the opposite of all of the good advice not to be on Goodreads. I literally read everything I can find written about me in my books, because my fear, no, I really do. My fear.
No, I do too. I read everything good, bad, and ugly too. That's why I'm laughing again. Yeah, I had no idea what messy kindred spirits of, no outlining, read it all, throw the jumble in our brains we were.
But like everybody I've read is like, I had my significant other lock my Goodreads accounts, and change the password so I couldn't get on there. My fear isn't somebody not liking it. My fear is nobody reading it. So I said this actually out of Heddle the other day. What really gets under my skin isn't the 1-star reviews. It's the 5-star reviews that get my main character's name wrong.
Got it.
Drives me crazy. But yeah, as if you're thinking enough to take the time to review the book, it's gotten under your skin somehow, and you're going to remember it.
Well, that book got under my skin. I'll be reading all the rest. Helene, if you can finish the sentence, to find your fairy tale, for writers or for anybody, to find your fairy tale, you need to, or you should, or any way that finishes that.
To find your fairy tale, you should keep your eyes open on alternate paths.
I love it. And you just hang out on the lattice.
Yeah.
I'll see you climbing the lattice, not the ladder. And all of the paths. Exactly. Exactly. Helene, thank you so much for
Oh,
hanging out with
thank
me.
you. It
It's good
is
to
a
see your
pleasure.
face,
You
and
too.
this is as in person as we get to be.
I
But
know.
in another reality, maybe people wouldn't have time to do this. So I'll be grateful for that.
Now, there's so much from this period that I hope sticks around. So this is one
We
of
have
them.
to pull some joy from it. So
Yep.
good luck. I can't wait to see what happens next, and I will commandeer you again. Don't you worry.
Anytime. I'm at your beck and call.
Have a good night. Thanks
Thanks,
everybody
everybody.
for watching.
Bye.
Bye, Helene. Good night, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, we get some really amazing advice about knowing what you want and not looking to the left and the right and comparing yourself and racing to some sort of proof that might not even be possible, and to really just take everything one day at a time and say, you know what, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to write, this is what I want to create, and your fairy tale is what you want it to be. See you on Thursday, everybody. Good night.